Welcome to Whisper Tales, where every whisper hides a nightmare. 99% of you guys are just watching but not subscribing. If you love spine-chilling horror stories that keep you up at night, then hit subscribe and join our dark journey. Because the next tale might be about you. Elliot and Grace had been together for 5 years. Their shared love for offbeat travel had taken them through forgotten roads, abandoned train stations, and eerie ghost towns. This time, they were on a road trip through rural Scotland. They hadn't planned much, just a rough map, a packed car, and a playlist of haunting old folk songs. It was on the third night of their trip when they took a wrong turn. The GPS blinked in confusion, spinning endlessly with no signal. Fog began to settle in, thick and unyielding. They were surrounded by dark woods, tall evergreens leaning in close to the narrow road as if they wanted to trap them. "Should we turn back?" Grace asked, her voice uneasy. Elliot squinted ahead. "There's no room to turn. Let's keep going. Maybe we'll find a village or something." They drove for what felt like hours. Time seemed slower, the kind of slow that only exists in dreams. Then, just as they were about to give up, they saw a dim glow ahead. It wasn't headlights. It was softer, warmer, like lanterns. As they drew closer, the fog cleared slightly, revealing a cobbled road that led into a village surrounded by dense woods. A wooden sign creaked above the entrance, "Welcome to Moormire." The village looked like it belonged in another century. Tudor-style houses, gaslit street lamps, horse-drawn carts. The scent of burning wood and fresh bread filled the air. People walked about in old-fashioned clothes, some tipping their hats, others offering warm smiles. "This place isn't on any map," Elliot whispered, staring at the surroundings. "How have we never heard of this?" An elderly woman with gray hair pinned neatly under a lace bonnet waved at them. "Welcome, travelers! You're just in time. The full moon's rising soon." Grace smiled politely. "Do you have a place we can stay?" "Of course," the woman said. "We don't get many visitors. You'll be staying at the Harvest Inn. My grandson Timothy will show you the way." Timothy, a boy of maybe 12, appeared as if out of nowhere and gestured for them to follow. As they walked, he said little, just hummed an old tune that made Grace shiver. The Harvest Inn looked like something out of a fairy tale: timbered walls, ivy crawling up the side, a warm yellow glow coming from inside. They were given room 3, overlooking the town square. Inside, everything was perfect. Quilted blankets, polished wood, antique lamps. But something felt too perfect, like a movie set. That night, they wandered the village. Locals invited them to a small festival. There were stalls with food, roast meats, candied apples, and hot cider. A fiddler played a cheerful, albeit eerie tune. "This is like a dream," Grace whispered. "Too perfect, you know?" Elliot nodded. "And look at the moon. It's massive tonight." At midnight, a bell rang from the chapel in the center of the village. Everyone grew quiet. The laughter stopped. A man in ceremonial robes lit a tall candle and began to chant in a language they didn't understand. "Is this part of the celebration?" Elliot asked a local woman. She smiled, eyes glassy. "The moon must be honored. It keeps us safe." After the ritual, the villagers resumed their festivities, but Grace had already started feeling dizzy. They returned to the inn. In their room, Grace collapsed on the bed. "I feel weird," she murmured. Elliot checked her temperature. It was normal. Maybe the cider was too strong. When morning came, the sky was gray, and a heavy silence hung over Moormire. Grace still felt off. Elliot went downstairs to ask for help, but the innkeeper was gone. He stepped outside. The town was empty. No voices, no carts, no music. Just silence. He walked toward the road they came in from. But it wasn't there. Where there had once been cobblestones leading out of the village was now thick forest. No path. No tire tracks. Panic set in. He ran back to Grace. "The road, it's gone. We're trapped." Grace sat up slowly. Her eyes were bloodshot. "I had a dream. A terrible dream. We were being watched. Sacrificed. That night, the villagers returned, as if nothing had happened. But they were different. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. Their skin looked waxy. And the fiddler tune, it was slower, darker. Elliot pulled aside one of the villagers. Where's the road? We need to leave. The man tilted his head. But you just got here. The moon hasn't finished its cycle. Cycle? Grace asked. What do you mean? The man smiled wider. Moormire appears only during a full moon. Once the light fades, it sleeps, until it's hungry again. They returned to their room, shaken. The walls felt like they were breathing. A cold wind whispered through the cracks. Grace began to cry. I think we're not guests, she said. I think we're food. Elliot sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. We'll find a way out. We always do. But somewhere in the village, the chapel bell began to toll again. And the moon, impossibly large, shone through their window, bathing everything in pale, unnatural light. The next morning, Moormire was vibrant again. Music drifted faintly through the alleys, smoke curled from chimneys, and villagers bustled about as though nothing had happened. But something was wrong. The air felt heavier. The colors too vivid. Grace woke with dark circles under her eyes and a tremor in her hands. I didn't sleep, she whispered. Elliot stood at the window. It's the same day. Look at the calendar, same date as yesterday. Grace sat up slowly. The village square below was alive again. A child skipped rope. A woman carried a basket of apples. But all their faces were turned slightly upward. Toward the sky. Toward the moon, still faintly visible even in daylight. Elliot grabbed his phone. No signal. No Wi-Fi. No time update. He stepped outside to ask questions. The same old woman who had welcomed them yesterday, Mrs. Howcroft, was sweeping her porch. Morning, Elliot offered, trying to be casual. Lovely weather, isn't it? Mrs. Howcroft smiled without showing her teeth. It's always lovely during the full moon. Elliot leaned on the gate. So, about the road, we tried leaving yesterday, but Moormire is safe now. You wouldn't want to wander out and get lost in the woods. Wolves out there. She turned to face him, her eyes gleaming. Best to stay put. Let the moon finish what it started. Elliot returned to the inn, shutting the door behind him. Grace was pacing. I can't breathe in here. It feels like it's watching me. I talked to the woman who greeted us. She knows. They all know. Grace clenched her fists. They're keeping us here. Worse, Elliot said. They're using us. They decided to explore. Maybe they could find a trail, a hidden path. Anything. They stuck to side streets, avoiding the chapel, which now had large black banners draped across its facade, symbols drawn in chalk, ancient and cryptic. They found a narrow trail behind the bakery, one hidden behind barrels and crates. It wound uphill into the woods. The branches scratched at their arms as they pushed through. And then, a clearing. In the center, a stone circle. Old, moss-covered, and surrounded by broken columns. A metal grate sat in the middle of the stone floor, padlocked shut. Bones littered the edges, animal maybe. But some, too long, too human. Grace gagged. Is this a shrine? She asked, stepping back. Or an altar? Just then, the grate rattled. Something below moved. Elliot grabbed Grace's hand. We have to go. As they turned, they found themselves face to face with Timothy, the boy from the inn. His eyes were black now, not just dark, but empty, void-like. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. She doesn't like when the offerings wander. Who's she? Elliot asked, voice tense. Timothy pointed to the sky. The mother. The one beneath. She keeps the village fed. Grace grabbed Elliot's arm. We're leaving. Now. They ran. The trail behind them twisted. Trees closed in. The village shifted in layout when they returned, as if the buildings had moved. The square was gone. The chapel stood directly ahead, doors open wide, spilling golden light and echoing with chanting. Elliot and Grace retreated to their room. They locked the door, pushed the dresser against it, sat on the bed in silence. I think they feed people to something under the chapel," Grace whispered. Whatever she is, she's down there. And I think the village makes deals. Offers strangers in exchange for safety." Grace began to cry. "We were just looking for a weekend getaway. Now we're part of a ritual." The next night, there was another feast. They were invited again, this time with no way to refuse. Timothy appeared at their door with an unnerving smile. "You're the guests of honor tonight," he said. "The harvest moon is full. You must come." The square was filled with long tables, overflowing with food. Villagers wore white robes with red stitching, symbols that hurt to look at too long. A woman played a harp with strings made of something translucent. Meat glistened on silver trays. Wine that smelled like iron sloshed in crystal goblets. They sat reluctantly. Eyes watched them from every direction. The mayor, a man named Ephraim Blackstone, stood and raised a silver goblet. "To the moon! And to our generous guests, who keep Moormire alive!" Applause. Smiles. Grace wanted to scream. She leaned into Elliot's ear. "We're the feast." Elliot's heart raced. He looked toward the edge of the square. Guards. Dressed in leather armor, faces painted white. No escape. Suddenly, the bell tolled. 12 slow, deep chimes. The villagers rose in unison and began walking toward the chapel, chanting. Timothy appeared again. "It's time." Grace tried to resist. "We're not going." Timothy tilted his head. "You already are." They blacked out. They awoke beneath the chapel. A deep, circular chamber carved from ancient stone. Candles flickered in the walls. The ceiling arched high above, covered in murals, the moon devouring men, women weeping blood, a beast with 10 mouths and no eyes. Grace was bound to a stone slab. Elliot to a pillar. Ephraim stood above them, robe fluttering like smoke. "The village must feed," he said calmly. "Every cycle we offer too. You should feel honored. Without you we starve. The mother awakens only for those born of the outside world. Fresh fear. Fresh sacrifice. You're monsters," Elliot spat. "No," Ephraim replied. "We're survivors." He lifted a silver dagger and sliced his palm. Blood dripped onto the floor, seeping into a symbol carved in the center of the room. It began to glow. A low rumble shook the chamber. Something stirred behind the grate they'd seen in the forest clearing, only now it was below them. Beneath the chapel. A horrible sound echoed, like weeping and growling at once. The grate burst open. Something rose. Something massive, wet and wrong. Too many limbs. Too many mouths. Pale skin stretching like wax over bones that twisted the wrong way. And it smiled, even though it had no eyes. "The mother is awake," Ephraim said. Elliot strained against his bindings. Grace screamed. But just as the creature slithered toward them, a shadow moved above. Mrs. Howcroft. She stepped forward and raised a red crystal. "The moon is waning," she said softly. The creature stopped. "No!" Ephraim screamed. "They must be fed now." But the creature turned on him, wrapping its limbs around his body and pulling him into the pit below. The chamber shook. Screams echoed from above. And then silence. The bonds on Elliot and Grace loosened. They fell to the ground, coughing. Mrs. Howcroft looked tired. "Go. Now." They didn't question her. They ran. Up the stairs. Out of the chapel. Through the shifting village. The road had returned. As they reached their car, the village began to fade. Not just into fog, into nothing. Houses crumbled into mist. The sky turned black. And then, they were on a highway. Real. Concrete. Cars passed. Elliot and Grace didn't speak for hours. Only when they were far away did Grace say, Was it real? Elliot looked in the rearview mirror. In the distance, the moon was rising again,